What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Lockdown Coverage. My name's Daniel, if you guys are new to the channel. On this episode, I'm going to be specifically breaking down the Miami Dolphins. Sorry to all you non-Dolphin fans out there. I'm probably going to be doing this segment once a week. And when I mean that, I mean breaking down Miami Dolphins coverage within free agency terms, updates, scores, predictions, draft-wise. So let's get into it. I'm going to be discussing realistic free agent choices for the Miami Dolphins. When I say realistic, I'm not going to be picking the top 5 players in free agency. That would mean the Dolphins will have no cap left in free agency. That's a dumb decision. That's actually not realistic. So when I say realistic, I mean maybe one top tier player, a few mid to low level exceptions that could be productive. Just because a player is getting $2 to $3 million in salary doesn't mean he could be productive, doesn't mean he could earn that big money deal in the future. So again, these are realistic, ideal free agent targets the Dolphins should consider. And again, this is all my opinion. This isn't what I think they actually are going to do. So let's get into it. So the first player I want the Dolphins to actually target, this is a top target. In my opinion, this is the best player in free agency that's not quarterback related. Even though there is a few quarterbacks on the market this year, like Phillip Rivers, who actually is going to hit free agency, is going to be discussing multiple teams in terms of where he's going to go. There is Drew Brees. Drew Brees is 100% going to return to the Saints, in my opinion. There's no chance he goes anywhere. Another player that is a free agent is Dak Prescott. He is listed on most people's free agent board as the number 1 player. I don't think he will hit the market, even if he doesn't sign a long-term extension with the Cowboys. I think he will get franchise tagged by the Cowboys. So the top player I want the Dolphins to get in free agency is Chris Jones. Chris Jones, defensive tackle for the Kansas City Chiefs. I don't know if you guys have heard of him. He is a dominant force. He is one of those cornerstones that you need for your team. He is probably, in my opinion, a grade below Aaron Donald. Aaron Donald is the MVP Defensive Player of the Year candidate year in and year out. Chris Jones is a huge, over 300-pound defensive tackle. I feel like he could either be a nose tackle, he could either be a 3-4 edge rusher. He could do it all. He's great against the run. The only thing is last year he did have durability issues, so that's the one thing I would consider being worried about throughout his career, because he is a big physical player. He does play in the trenches, but I would offer him that $20 million a year contract. He is worth that money, in my opinion. He had 9 sacks and he missed 2, 3, 4 games this year with Kansas City. The year before that, I think he had over double-digit sacks. He is the number 1 player I would be targeting if he hits the open market. I do think the Kansas City Chiefs are going to try and pursue him, but with Patrick Mahomes' deal in the future, it's kind of staring them in the eyes. I don't know if they could afford a defensive player that's worth $20 million a year. They have Tyrann Mathieu. They have Kendall Fuller. They might re-sign in free agency. So I don't know, but the Dolphins' number 1 priority in free agency should be Chris Jones. He will be that cornerstone. We'll have a great defensive line. We'll have Christian Wilkins team up with him, Taco Charlton. The only thing we would be missing is a pass rusher. Edge pass rusher specifically. I think we could get that in this year's draft. We have a lot of picks in the draft, so don't forget, if we still have needs after free agency, we could fill them in the draft. So that is the number 1 player I think the Dolphins should target in free agency. Some other high to mid-level players I think the Dolphins should get in free agency are players like Joe Thuney. Joe Thuney is the guard for the New England Patriots. The Patriots line has been phenomenal throughout the past couple of years. That's why Tom Brady has been able to excel at the age that he has been able to excel. What is he now? Like 87 years old. So I think the Dolphins should target him. Another trench player the Dolphins should target is Graham Goselaw. He is a kind of no name that you guys might not have heard of because he is another guard. I think the Dolphins could use guard depth, starting guards, even in my opinion. These should be the 2 starting guards the Dolphins should look at in free agency. He plays for the Detroit Lions. He had a good grade Pro Football Focus wise. He started every game, I'm pretty sure. We need offensive line help. We need trench help. So having Chris Jones and having a potential top 10 guard, a potential top 30 guard in the league, I think that would help drastically, especially if we start Tua, especially if we start old Ryan Fitzpatrick. Even though he's still amazing in my opinion, we do need help. The quarterback struggled mightily last year. Our running game struggled mightily last year. Ryan Fitzpatrick led the team in rushing. What did he have? Like a little over 200 yards. I think that's pathetic. That is probably the worst rushing season I experienced, was the 2019-2020 Dolphins season. So those are another two players I think we could get. Another player I do like is Anthony Harris, safety from the Vikings. He was a turnover machine last year. He's a great tackler. I don't know if he is a free safety. I feel like because they have Harrison Smith with the Vikings, Harrison Smith played mostly in the box. But I think Anthony Harris could fill that void. He is a good tackler. He had 6 interceptions. He was tied for the league lead in interceptions last year. He's also a high-end free agency player that we could look at, but I don't know if the Dolphins want to spend, let's say, $7 to $10 million on 2 players, including Chris Jones. That's probably going to be worth $18 to $20 million in cap space. Those are a few more targets I think we should pick. And then we have a few low to mid-level exceptions. The Dolphins should also look to get cornerback help. The 2 targets I was looking at are probably James Bradbury, cornerback from the Panthers. Again, I don't know how much he is going to get in free agency. I would say he would get that $6 to $8 million range annually. He is a great player. He has over 60 starts under his belt. He was probably the only consistent piece other than Luke Kuechly that the Panthers had last year at corner. He's a tall, physical corner. He's over 6 feet. He could be that number one. He could be that outside guy that you hope to pair with Xavier Howard. Hopefully we could fill that void. We've had terrible number 2 cornerbacks for the past few years. Eric Rowe was an example of that until he switched to safety. So I think that if we get Anthony Harris and let's say Bradbury, even if we get a player like Kendall Fuller from the Chiefs, I mentioned him earlier, he did not have a good year last year, but if you guys saw the Super Bowl, he showed why he has played like a Pro Bowler at times. He's a Pro Bowl caliber corner. He has versatility. He could play safety. He could play slot. He could even shadow your number 1 receiver, as long as it's not like a Julio Jones, obviously, because players like that are unguardable, but he is on the shorter side. But those are 2 types of corners I think the Dolphins should look at. Anthony Harris is another good safety. That would solidify our secondary. We have good linebackers. We have Jerome Baker. If we get Chris Jones as well, we would have a crazy front. So that is one way we could build our free agency. If we did get those type of players, I'm assuming we'd have $50 million left in free agency. I'm sorry, maybe even a little less, maybe 40 million, but I don't mind that. We have this much money so we could get great players. We need to surround great players with young players that we're getting in the draft, because we have a lot of draft assets. And then some other low-end targets that the Dolphins could look at in free agency are players like Brian Bulaga. He is an offensive tackle for the Green Bay Packers. He is a bit on the older side, but again, if you can't or don't have any offensive tackles for this year, he could be that 1 to 2 year kind of fill in the void until you do find a young player that you think could start on the offensive line. I don't mind that. He's still good. He's still productive. He is a little bit injury prone. Some other players we could also look at tackle is Andres Pete. He's a guard. He is a tackle also for the New Orleans Saints out of Stanford. I remember him being a top 10 pick if I'm not mistaken. He does have athleticism. He can pull if you need him to. He is versatile, which is what you need in this league. You need depth, you need versatility. I don't know how much they would command. I don't know if they'll be starters. Brian Bulaga might command a little bit more because he's on the older side. He might want to play for a contender. If not, he might want to get paid by another team that wants him if he knows he's not going to reach the playoffs. Another player I think will be a key asset, kind of like a Taco Charlton of what we did last year where we got him off waivers. He kind of realized that this was his last chance in the NFL, is a player like Vic Beasley. Vic Beasley came out of Clemson. He was a beast. He was a top pick. Look at what he did when the Falcons made it to the Super Bowl. They were a top 10 defense. He led the NFL, if I'm not mistaken, in sacks. He had over 15. And then the past 2 years, his production's kind of slipped. He got paid a little bit, and he's not producing at that rate. So maybe it's a player like that where he realizes that this might be his last chance in the NFL to produce, and he might come on. You never know. We could have him for a cheap price. If he does play really well, we could offer him that extension. We could have that pass rusher of the future. He's still young. He's 26, 27, if I'm not mistaken. So those are a few free agent targets I predict that the Dolphins could look at. A few free agent targets that I like, in my opinion, whether it's high-end, mid to low-end exceptions, players that are on the cusp of not being in the NFL anymore. They might realize that this is a lost chance. They might produce. If you guys like this video, please leave a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Please subscribe. We have a lot of videos coming up. I mentioned in my latest video of Joe Burrow that we are going to do a mock draft. I am scheduling that to be the next video. So if you guys like mock drafts, stay tuned. We'll be coming out within the next few days. Thanks for listening, guys.